Yuji serves as the vessel for Ryomen Sukuna, the undisputed king of curses. Sukuna was a legendary and extremely powerful sorcerer from the Heian era, so powerful that the combined strength of the sorcerers of that time could not defeat him. After his death, his soul was divided into 20 indestructible fingers. These fingers were preserved in grave wax and scattered across Japan to prevent Sukuna from being resurrected, as his remains were too powerful to be completely destroyed. Unlike ordinary cursed objects, which can immediately possess or alter their hosts, Yuji has a rare 1 in a million constitution that allows him to withstand Sukuna's power. Because of this, Yuji can consume Sukuna's fingers, contain his soul within his body, and even suppress Sukuna when he tries to take control. This allows Yuji to regain control of his body even after Sukuna takes over. Yuji becomes Sukuna's vessel in the very first episode of the series. Megumi Fushiguro tracks a high-grade cursed object, one of Sukuna's fingers, to Yuji's high school. However, Yuji's friends from the occult club have already unsealed the finger out of curiosity. Its cursed energy attracts numerous vicious curses to the school, putting Yuji's friends in serious danger. Yuji rushes back to save them, but he and Megumi quickly find themselves outmatched. When Yuji realizes that Megumi is about to be killed, he makes a desperate decision and swallows Sukuna's finger, hoping to gain enough cursed energy to fight the curse. Instead of dying from the cursed object's deadly poison, Yuji successfully absorbs Sukuna. The King of Curses takes control of Yuji's body, effortlessly destroys the curse, and prepares to kill everyone else. However, to everyone's surprise, Yuji manages to suppress Sukuna and regain control of his own body. Because Sukuna is now safely contained within Yuji, the Jujutsu higher-ups decide to delay Yuji's execution. Their plan is for Yuji to consume all 20 of Sukuna's fingers, allowing Sukuna to be completely eradicated. Once all the fingers have been consumed, Yuji will be executed, eliminating Sukuna along with him. Megumi Fushiguro's transformation into the vessel of Ryomen Sukuna is one of the most calculated tragedies in Jujutsu Kaisen. From early on, Sukuna took a special interest in Megumi for two major reasons. First, Megumi is a descendant of the Zenin clan and inherited one of the most powerful curse techniques in history, the 10 Shadows technique. Sukuna recognized its incredible potential, especially its ability to summon Mahoraga, a Shikigami capable of adapting to virtually any phenomenon. Sukuna intended to eventually exploit this technique for himself. Second, while Yuji's body was essentially a perfect cage that could suppress Sukuna, Sukuna wanted a vessel that would give him complete freedom while also providing him with a powerful arsenal of abilities. He patiently waited for the right opportunity while remaining inside Yuji. That opportunity came through a binding vow Sukuna had previously forced Yuji to make. By chanting the word "in-chain," Sukuna could take complete control of Yuji's body for 1 minute. In exchange, Sukuna promised not to kill anyone during that time. However, the vow never specified that he couldn't harm someone or transfer himself to another vessel. During the culling game, Megumi was already emotionally vulnerable and physically exhausted after his battle with Yorozu. Sukuna saw this as the perfect opportunity to execute his plan. Sukuna suddenly chanted, "in-chain," taking control of Yuji's body. Before anyone could react, he moved at incredible speed, ripped off one of Yuji's fingers, now saturated with Sukuna's cursed energy, and forcibly shoved it down Megumi's throat. Megumi's weakened state and the element of surprise allowed Sukuna to successfully transfer himself into him. However, simply entering Megumi's body wasn't enough to guarantee complete control. Megumi's strong will initially resisted Sukuna from within, much like Yuji had done. To completely break Megumi's resistance, Sukuna resorted to an even more horrifying method. Using Megumi's own body, he killed Tsumiki, Megumi's beloved stepsister, who was being controlled by the ancient sorcerer Yorozu. The immense psychological trauma shattered Megumi's spirit. With Megumi's will broken, Sukuna was finally able to suppress his soul and take complete control of his body. After Geto's death at the hands of Yuta Okotsu in Jujutsu Kaisen 0, his body was taken over by the ancient sorcerer Kenjaku, who used Geto's corpse as his primary vessel for carrying out the culling game. Following his defeat during the night parade of 100 demons, Geto was left severely injured in an alleyway. His former best friend, Satoru Gojo, eventually found him and delivered the final blow. However, because Gojo couldn't bring himself to immediately destroy or properly dispose of Geto's body, the corpse was left vulnerable. To understand how Kenjaku became Geto, you first need to understand his innate curse technique. Kenjaku is an ancient sorcerer who has survived for over 1,000 years by transferring his brain from one body to another. He replaces the brain of his target with his own, which leaves the distinctive stitching scar across the forehead. By taking over someone's body, Kenjaku gains more than just physical control. He can also access the host's innate curse technique. Over the centuries, Kenjaku had possessed numerous bodies, but Geto's corpse was particularly valuable for his plans. Geto possessed the cursed spirit manipulation technique, which allowed him to absorb and control thousands of cursed spirits. This ability was extremely useful to Kenjaku, because it allowed him to manipulate and extract cursed techniques from the spirits he had accumulated. Kenjaku ultimately used this ability as part of his plans for the culling game. One of the most disturbing details about Kenjaku's possession of Geto is that Geto's body seemingly retained a faint trace of its original owner. During the Shibuya incident, while Kenjaku was attempting to seal Gojo inside the prison realm, Geto's hand suddenly moved on its own and grabbed Kenjaku by the neck. Although Geto's consciousness was essentially gone, this moment suggested that some residual will or instinct remained within his body, briefly resisting the parasite controlling it. Hana Kurusu is a major player in the culling game and serves as the vessel for the Angel, an ancient sorcerer from the Heian era. Hana was an ordinary human who became involved in the dangerous world of Jujutsu. Unlike other vessels, such as Yuji Itadori, who constantly struggled against Sukuna for control of his body, Hana and the Angel have a peaceful and cooperative relationship. The Angel is an ancient sorcerer whose main goal is to hunt down and eliminate other incarnated sorcerers. Through the Angel, Hana can manifest angelic wings and a halo. She can also use the Angel's signature cursed technique, Technique Extinguishment, along with its maximum output, Jacob's Ladder. This devastating attack produces a massive pillar of light capable of nullifying cursed techniques, extinguishing cursed energy, and disabling barriers. Hana's transformation into a vessel can be traced back to Kenjaku's plans for the culling game. In order to eventually merge humanity with Master Tengen, Kenjaku used idol transfiguration and binding contracts made centuries earlier to transform ancient sorcerers into cursed objects. These objects were then implanted into modern humans, allowing the ancient sorcerers to reincarnate. At some point before the culling game began, the Angel accepted Kenjaku's offer to reincarnate and chose Hana Kurusu as her vessel. However, unlike Sukuna, who sought to dominate Yuji's body completely, the Angel chose to coexist with Hana. Because Hana accepted the Angel and willingly shared her body, the Angel allowed her to retain her consciousness and control of her physical form. In return, Hana gained access to the Angel's immense power, allowing the two of them to survive the culling game while pursuing their shared goal of eliminating the incarnated sorcerers. Tsumiki Fushiguro. Megumi Fushiguro's kind-hearted stepsister becomes a tragic pawn in Kenjaku's plans for the culling game. Tsumiki serves as the vessel for Yorozu, an ancient sorcerer from the Heian era. Yorozu was a powerful and obsessive sorcerer who developed unrequited romantic feelings for Ryomen Sukuna. When she incarnates inside Tsumiki's body, she gains access to Tsumiki's memories. This initially allows Yorozu to imitate Tsumiki's voice and mannerisms convincingly enough to fool Megumi. However, she eventually reveals her true personality and her powerful curse technique, construction. Tsumiki's transformation into a vessel was not accidental. It was part of Kenjaku's carefully planned preparations for the culling game. Long before the culling game began, Tsumiki was marked by Kenjaku. She was also affected by the Yasuhachi Bridge curse, which eventually left her trapped in a mysterious coma. At some point, Kenjaku had arranged for sealed cursed objects containing the souls of ancient sorcerers to be implanted into marked individuals. In Tsumiki's case, the object contained Yorozu. Normally, an ordinary human body would reject such a cursed object and die from its effects, but Tsumiki's body had been prepared to withstand the incarnation. Once the culling game was ready to begin, Kenjaku remotely activated the idol transfiguration technique he had extracted from Mahito. This allowed him to alter the brains of marked individuals across Japan, essentially rewiring them so they could function as sorcerers and properly host the incarnated beings within them. After Kenjaku activated this final stage, Tsumiki finally woke from her coma. However, she was no longer truly herself. Yorozu immediately took control of her body and entered the culling game as an incarnated sorcerer, turning Tsumiki into one of the most tragic victims of Kenjaku's plan. In Jujutsu Kaisen, the name Noritoshi Kamo refers to two different people, the modern-day student from Kyoto Jujutsu High, and his infamous ancestor from over 150 years ago. Because of Kenjaku's ability to transfer his brain between bodies, the historical Noritoshi Kamo eventually became one of his vessels. During the Meiji era, The historical Noritoshi Kamo was a member of the Kamo clan. Very little is known about his actual personality because Kenjaku eventually took control of his body and used it for his own purposes. As a result, history remembers Kamo as the most evil sorcerer in history. While possessing Kamo's body, Kenjaku carried out horrific experiments on a woman who possessed a unique physiology that allowed her to give birth to human and cursed spirit hybrids. He imprisoned her and forced her to undergo 9 pregnancies, followed by abortions, eventually creating the cursed womb death paintings, including Chozo, Eso, and Kechizu. Because Kenjaku used Kamo's blood in these experiments, the death paintings inherited the Kamo clan's signature blood manipulation technique. Unlike Yuji, Megumi, or Tsumiki, the historical Noritoshi Kamo did not become a vessel through a cursed object or willingly agree to an incarnation. He was simply taken over by Kenjaku, who replaced his brain and used his body as a vessel. Kenjaku eventually abandoned Kamo's body and continued transferring himself into other vessels. However, the atrocities committed while he possessed Kamo's body were attributed to Kamo himself. As a result, the historical Noritoshi Kamo's name became permanently associated with some of the most horrific experiments in Jujutsu history, leaving a lasting stain on the reputation of the Kamo clan. Kaori Itadori is a minor but important figure in Jujutsu Kaisen. She was the wife of Jin Itadori and the biological mother of Yuji Itadori. Although very little is known about her life before her death, her body became an important part of Kenjaku's long-term plans. Kaori was an ordinary human who married Jin Itadori. Her personality and personal history remain largely unknown, but she possessed a rare, innate curse technique known as the anti-gravity system, which allowed her to manipulate and nullify the effects of gravity. At some point, Kaori died under unknown circumstances. However, her body was eventually taken over by the ancient sorcerer Kenjaku, who transferred his brain into her skull and began using her body as one of his vessels. Kaori's father-in-law, Wasuke Itadori, immediately sensed that something was wrong when she seemingly returned after her death. He distrusted her and warned Jin about her, although he had no idea that the woman in front of him was actually Kenjaku. While possessing Kaori's body, Kenjaku continued his plans and eventually became the partner of Jin Itadori. Through Kaori's body, Kenjaku gave birth to Yuji Itadori. This was not simply a coincidence. Kenjaku had a specific purpose for Yuji's creation. He was deliberately engineered to become an extraordinarily powerful vessel capable of containing Ryomen Sukuna. After Gojo was sliced in half by Ryomen Sukuna, the Jujutsu sorcerers were left in a desperate situation. Sukuna was still standing, while almost everyone else was completely outmatched. To close the gap, Yuta Okotsu activated a desperate contingency plan developed with Shoko Ieri. After Yuta decapitated Kenjaku, Rika consumed Kenjaku's brain, allowing Yuta to copy his cursed technique, brain transplantation. Yuta then used the copied technique to transfer his own brain into Gojo's freshly deceased body, which had been heavily restored using reverse curse technique. In doing so, Gojo's body temporarily became Yuta's vessel. Once Yuta's brain was inside Gojo's skull, he gained access to the body's physical abilities and, most importantly, the 6 eyes. This allowed him to fight Sukuna using Gojo's body and techniques. However, Yuta's possession of Gojo's body had a strict time limit. His connection to the body was tied to Rika's complete manifestation, giving him approximately 5 minutes before the copied technique would expire. Using Gojo's body and the 6 eyes also placed an enormous strain on Yuta's brain. The 6 eyes provided an overwhelming amount of sensory information, making it extremely difficult for Yuta to process everything while simultaneously fighting Sukuna. As a result, he had to rely on brief periods of intense concentration during their battle. When the 5-minute limit expired, Yuta's technique began to collapse. At first, it appeared that Yuta would die as a result of losing control of the borrowed body. However, it was later revealed that Rika had preserved the connection between Yuta's soul and brain. This allowed Yuta to eventually return to his original body, where he was able to survive rather than suffering permanent death.